Hello and welcome back to Cult Leader. I'm your Cult Leader, Spencer Henry, and today, Cult Babes, we're going on a digital deep dive into one of the strangest, saddest, and most elaborate stories ever written on MSN Messenger. Talk about a throwback. It's got everything. We've got a fake coma baby, webcam blackmail, kitchen knife espionage, 193 email accounts, 568 billion pounds in sunken treasure, and a teenage boy who catfished his best friend into trying to kill him. What do you even call that? When someone catfishes their best friend into murdering them? A killfish? A murder puppet? Okay, that's dumb. Let's just call it what it is. The first documented case of someone inciting their own murder. It went down at Goose Green Alley in suburban Altrincham, Greater Manchester on June 29th of 2003. A Sunday so hot you could feel your brain cooking behind your eyes. Goose Green Alley sounds quaint, until you realize it leads to nowhere, literally. It's a dead end with a 40-foot drop at the end, boxed in by brick and concrete, and it's just off Stamford New Road, where there's a hair salon, some shops, and a statue of two bronze geese watching over what was about to be one of Britain's weirdest crime scenes ever. This is where John, a 14-year-old Year 9 grammar school student described as quiet, olive-skinned, brilliant, and emotionally starved, was found collapsed and bleeding, stabbed in the chest and gut. His organs had been punctured and his life was draining out of him. He was barely conscious. The boy who made the 999 call was Mark, age 16, described as an average blonde heading for college from a working-class family. He told police they'd been attacked by a stranger, an unidentifiable hooded man in black. In his early 20s, jumped them in the alley, stabbed John, then bolted off. Detective Chief Inspector Julian Ross didn't waste any time. He immediately issued a public warning, and media outlets ran wild with it. Boy stabbed. A violent maniac was on the loose in peaceful little Altrincham. Doors were locked tight. Kids stopped walking themselves to school. The whole neighborhood was on edge. Except, there's one tiny problem in this story. And it was found out pretty quick. CCTV footage showed no hooded attacker. No man in black, no figure lurking in the shadows. Just two boys, Mark and John, entering the alley together. No one else. From his hospital bed, John eventually confessed, "Mark stabbed me." When asked why, he shrugged, "I don't know." But the truth wasn't that simple. Oh, no. Let's rewind the tape. John was born in the late 80s in Greater Manchester, and he was a bright kid, yeah, but haunted by a childhood that played like a bleak indie film. When he was around 4 years old, he stumbled upon paper listing his birth date and his first name, but a different last name. And that's how he learned that the man who had been raising him wasn't actually his father. His real biological father was reportedly abusive, physically and sexually towards his mother, and had abducted John as a baby. The man he called Dad? Just a stand-in. A drug user. A ghost. By the time John was 7, he vanished altogether. After his stepfather was out of his life, John moved with his mother and younger sister to a smaller house. He vividly remembered sitting on the stairs, listening to his mother cry in the living room. It became a core memory for him. And school wasn't much of a refuge. Despite being the top of his class, John was a target. Racial slurs, homophobic insults. He was bullied for his brown skin, for hanging out with girls, for being quiet. He didn't lash out, he didn't confide in anyone. He folded it all inward. By the time he hit adolescence, John had developed severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. He bathed in a strict sequence. He got dressed in a ritualized order. His bedroom was a perfectly aligned museum of pens, bottles, notebooks, all arranged with unsettling precision. Any disturbance, and panic set in. He was trying to force structure on chaos because life had given him none. In 2002, when his mom bought him a laptop for schoolwork, she unknowingly handed him the keys to another universe. The keyboard to his own kingdom. He spent most nights locked in his room, as we all did, in the early 2000s, typing, escaping. But beneath the keyboard, he kept a kitchen knife because he didn't feel part of the family, he told his therapist. There was nowhere to go except online. I feel like we need to place ourselves in the 2000s tech timeline because this was still pre-MySpace. Skype was just barely rolling. You couldn't even use iPods on Windows yet. But there were chat rooms, if you know, you know. The old ASL days. I mean, Lord, we were in those chat rooms, okay? And so was John. By early 2003, he was deep in the online universe, logging in at 4 p.m., staying on until 7 a.m. the next morning. No eating, no sleeping, no talking out loud, just typing away. He just had to be on there. He had to be doing it. He joined MSN chat rooms for Manchester teens, and his usernames were harmless on the surface. livinitlargelad@hotmail.com. Rachel _@hotmail.com. Oh yeah. He was cycling through personas depending on the mood. A shy guy one day, a cheeky chab the next, a stunning 16-year-old blonde named Rachel West. Well, that's actually how it ties into Mark. So Mark was 2 years older than John. A little naive, kind of lonely, your average dude from a blue-collar family. He liked football, helped out at a restaurant, wasn't particularly bookish, but he was polite. The kind of kid who still held the door open for people. To John, Mark was perfect. He was everything. He was handsome, kind, unguarded. They even had the same taste in movies. And, well, he fell hard. But there was a problem. John didn't believe someone like Mark would ever want to be friends with someone like him, let alone more than friends. So he came up with a workaround, a decoy. He introduced himself as Rachel with a fake photo, a dreamy 16-year-old blonde bombshell, flirty, vulnerable, emotionally available, but always just out of reach. A little elusive. I mean, some guys like a little mystery. Whatever the ruse was, it worked. Mark was pretty immediately smitten with Rachel. She was his dream girl, except, as we know, she didn't exist. Because Rachel was John. To keep Mark interested, John created a whole totally unhinged fictional universe. And if you've ever seen an episode of Catfish, you know how it goes. The romance begins, the crisis sets in, then the constant excuses for why the people can't meet up or why their video doesn't work. The cast of characters who are meant to corroborate the story, and the lies upon lies to cover up more lies. Let's break down this homespun psychological soap opera from the top, yeah? At the center of it all was a main event. The muse, the illusion that launched 1,000 lies. Rachel West, aka The Girl. Perfect, mysterious, elusive. Played by John, who also inserted himself into the story as Rachel's stepbrother. Rachel was the crown jewel in John's fantasy empire. She was 16, she was beautiful, flirtatious, emotionally grounded, and always just on the verge of meeting Mark. She was the reason Mark logged on every night. Always so close to meeting. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe next week. But never anything solid. Like a mirage in the hormone-infused teen desert. But who was willing to meet up in person? Rachel's stepbrother, John. The two started talking online when Rachel wasn't on, and started a friendship that ended up with the two of them hanging out in person. And not only did they meet, their parents met, and somehow no red flags. Did nobody bring up Rachel? Mark's parents started allowing him to stay the night at John's for sleepovers, where they'd play video games, hang out, harmless, and then one night, after watching porn together, they performed oral sex on each other. You know, boys will be boys. But whenever Mark got too close to seeing the seams of the illusion, to finding out that Rachel wasn't in fact real and John was just playing her online all the time, bam, crisis mode. Someone's in the hospital, someone's watching, someone's been kidnapped. The excuses escalated like a soap opera plot that was written by AI. But this all brings us to Kevin McGregory, the villain, also played by John, of course. He'd created an entire universe. Kevin was a self-proclaimed gay stalker, obsessed with Rachel, creepy, violent, possessive, and naturally also tormenting Rachel's stepbrother, John. In spring of 2003, the plot took a turn into a straight-up cyber hell. Kevin, John, tells Mark that he's kidnapped Rachel and the only way to save her, well, you gotta wank it on webcam for him to watch. And Mark, believing this was a life-or-death situation, did it for Rachel. And John watched, as Kevin, while Mark, thinking he was saving the love of his life, humiliated himself in front of a laptop camera. But it didn't stop there. Kevin returned days later to tell Mark the unthinkable. It was all for nothing. Rachel was dead. She had been gang raped, tortured, and murdered. Kevin even described the moment in grotesque Cinematic detail. She stained my sheets when she was bleeding. Mark was heartbroken. Well, broken, period. Mentally, emotionally. And just when you think John might pull the plug on the whole production, like, enough is enough, okay, Rachel's out of the picture now, I don't have to pretend anymore or keep up with this facade, he didn't. He doubled down. With Rachel dead, he attempted a rebound and introduced a new love interest for Mark. Lindsay East, another blonde. Rachel West, Lindsay East, love it. Subtle, okay? He's really pulling a fast one here, but Mark falls for it. He bites again. And he starts falling for Lindsay just as hard as he had fell for Rachel. But then she's killed off too. What could possibly cause her death? According to the chat logs, she was eliminated by the British government. You'd think Mark would start questioning things at this point, but the poor guy was in too deep. And then we have another soap opera level plot twist, straight out of General Hospital. Rachel, who he'd thought had been murdered, returned. Rachel 2.0. Rachel resurrected. She's back, but she's different. How? Amnesia. Yeah, no memory, no context, no explanation except I was in a coma. And on top of that, another bombshell. She gave birth during that coma with Mark's baby. How did that happen? Well, obviously it didn't, but Mark had been so gaslit and groomed into thinking virtual sex acts had real-life consequences that despite never having met Rachel, because she doesn't exist, he accepted the blur in reality and the belief that the baby was his. Because at this point, reality was irrelevant. Mark was all in. Not wanting to rock the boat, he continued talking to this new Rachel like nothing was off, like nothing had ever happened, like she hadn't been murdered, and then turns out she was just in a coma that whole time. Now, every convoluted lie needs that one guy whose job it is to just nod and back it all up, right? Well, in this story, that's Dave McNeil, also played by, you guessed it, John. If this is feeling hard to follow, I hope you're watching along with this episode on YouTube because we've got charts, okay? Think of Dave as the chat room's background extra, a filler character, narrative insurance for all purposes. His entire purpose was to drop in like, yeah, Rachel's real. I've met her. Nothing more. And then came her. The most elaborate, dangerous, and batshit character John would ever create, Janet Dobinson. A 44-year-old no-nonsense British intelligence officer. Why am I picturing like Gillian Anderson, like flirting over webcam, recruiting teenagers from chat rooms? Anyway, Dobinson was stern. She was controlling, always typing in all caps, always using commands. She told Mark that he'd been personally chosen for her program, and his code name? 47695. Very official, very Jason Bourne. And once Mark was in, the missions began. But first, there were to be some tests, some loyalty drills, secret rendezvous. He had to pull John out of school one day because assassins were after him. Another time, Janet warned Mark that he was being watched by spies disguised as ice cream men and bus drivers. All part of the operation. By mid-June 2003, things had escalated and gotten crazier, if you can believe it. One of the orders came straight from the top, or so Janet claimed. The Prime Minister himself, Tony Blair, had requested something delicate. Mark was told that he had to perform a sexual act, suck John's dick to make foreign enemies believe John was gay. This somehow would destabilize threats to national defense. That's right, gay sex as counterterrorism. A true patriot. Because when the fate of the free world is on the line and your superior officer is a horny middle-aged woman in all caps, you don't ask questions, right? Meanwhile, John started crumbling behind the scene. What had started as this digital love story was now a weaponized fan fiction spiraling out of control. I couldn't undo it, he later said. My life was on the internet, and I was trapped. In late June of 2003, Janet dropped the ultimate bombshell that escalated everything. John, her precious government asset, was terminally ill. He'd been diagnosed with a slow-growing brain tumor, with no hope or chance of survival. And worse, his death wasn't just inevitable, it was mission critical. You see, according to Janet, John's mind held a secret code, a combination known only to him. And that code unlocked a massive treasure chest hidden at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. I know. You guys, I know. They're teenagers. I don't know. Okay? A chest holding an estimated value of $568 billion. Yeah, that's billion with a B. So what does Mark gotta do? Well, the catch, the code could only be accessed if John was dead, and it had to be Mark who did it. Because that makes sense, right? On June 28th of 2003, the final plan was delivered. Janet gave Mark his marching orders. First, buy a knife. Next, wait 20 minutes after the stabbing before calling help. And most importantly, do not tell a soul, not even your mum. But not to worry, Mark would be rewarded handsomely. He was promised £80 million in cash, a lifetime job in the British government, sex with Janet as a bonus, a handshake from the Queen herself, and a private meeting with Tony Blair, because why not? He'd performed oral sex for the guy. He might as well get a thank you in person. She even issued a failsafe, the abort code, 6969, which is exactly the kind of code a 14-year-old boy would make up. And that's not a joke, it's not a drill. If John said 6969 out loud, the mission was canceled. Mark didn't blink. He believed Janet. He believed all of it. This entire universe that John had just created in his head. Here's the actual exchange from that night. Mark, you want me to kill him? You want me to take him to Trafford Center and kill him in the middle of Trafford Center? Janet, yes. Mark, and just leave him to die? Janet, no, stay with him. I'll get help for you. Mark asked when he'd finally be able to meet her. Janet, John replied, I'll be there, disguised as a detective. And that brings us to June 29th, 2003. That blisteringly hot Sunday in Altrincham, when things went from virtual to visceral. The boys met at Trafford Center, a bustling shopping mall where families browsed for trainers and teens loitered around with milkshakes. And somewhere in the bustle, two teenage boys slipped through the crowd and into Boots at the Trafford Center. They walked out with a Sabatier kitchen knife, shiny and new, still in its plastic casing. The kind people buy for carving roast or prepping Sunday dinner. The cashier probably didn't blink twice. Two kids buying a knife in the middle of a heat wave? Must be for a barbecue or something. No questions asked. From there, they walked to Goose Green Alley, a narrow brick lane with no exit and a 40-foot drop at the end, tucked away behind a row of shops, out of sight, out of earshot. It was there that Mark turned to John, raised the knife, and stabbed him, once in the chest, and then again in the abdomen. The blade sliced deep, puncturing John's kidney, slicing into his liver, rupturing his gallbladder. Blood began to pool inside of his chest cavity. His lungs collapsed. His diaphragm stopped moving. He was suffocating from the inside out. Mark whispered, "Trust me, I love you, bro." And John collapsed. Mark waited exactly 20 minutes, just as Janet had instructed. And then he called for help. There was a man, he told the operator. He attacked us, a guy in a black hoodie, and then he ran. Police responded fast. This wasn't normal for Altrincham. A kid stabbed in broad daylight in a quiet alley behind the geese statue? That's when Detective Julian Ross issued a public alert. A dangerous attacker was on the loose. News outlets ran the headline, "Boy stabbed." But again, the CCTV told a different story. Footage showed two men entering the alley. There was no third man, no hooded attacker, and Mark's story unraveled in minutes. Police arrested him on the spot. When questioned, he said, "I heard voices." Investigators weren't sure what they were dealing with here. Some kind of delusion, trauma, a mental breakdown, or something darker. The confusion was so real that police even arrested a real girl named Rachel, a shop assistant in town, thinking she might be involved in the murder. Manchester police assumed it was a pedophile ring of sorts, a grown man manipulating boys online. Possibly there were more victims out there, possibly more predators. They brought in forensic analyst Sally Hogg, and she is who opened Pandora's box. What she found was beyond anything they had expected. Over 58,000 lines of chat, over 193 email accounts, a constellation of characters, all communicating with Mark, and one strange linguistic breadcrumb. The word moidah, used by nearly all of them. Different names, different ages, different genders, but the same typo. It was strange. Even stranger, most of the accounts, they traced back to the same IP address, John's house. The smoking gun came in October of 2003, when Hogg noticed that a Janet Dobinson had logged into John's laptop at a time when only John was home. No one else could have done it. And that's when it clicked. That every single character, Rachel West, Lindsay East, Kevin, Janet, they were all John. Every flirt, every threat, every mission, all orchestrated by a lonely, brilliant 14-year-old boy who just wanted to feel close to someone. That same month, just as he was about to leave for school, police showed up at John's house, and he was arrested in his school uniform. The charge was incitement to murder, but not just anyone's murder. His own murder. It was the first case of its kind in British legal history. And no one, not the police, not the court, not even the boys themselves, knew what to make of it. In May of 2004, the Manchester Crown courtroom was packed and humming with tension. The court specifically prohibited the media from revealing the boys' real names or publishing any identifying details. Even Vanity Fair and major British outlets had to follow this strict rule. But inside, the real story was finally coming out. Presiding over the trial was Judge David Madison, a man not easily shaken. But he still had never heard of a case quite like this. Prosecutor Nicholas Clark laid it all out cold. A digital plot so outlandish, so multi-layered, so disturbingly intimate, that even seasoned barristers were visibly stunned. John, now 15, pled guilty to perverting the course of justice and inciting his own murder. It was a legal first. Mark, who was just 17 at the time, pled guilty to attempted murder, a crime he believed he'd committed for the British government, for Queen and country, for love, patriotism. But the most surreal moment came when the courtroom revealed the truth to Mark. Possibly for the very first time. Rachel, her baby, fake. Kevin, fake. Lindsay, Dave, Janet Dobinson, sexy secret agent extraordinaire, all fiction. Every tear Mark had shed, every masturbatory mission, every cryptic email, every late night chat, every whispered "I love you, bro," as the knife went in, all of it came from the same fingertips. John's. Mark was visibly shaken. He stood in open court and said what we were all thinking. I've been a fool. It was the understatement of the century. And again, he's young. He's 17. He's a kid. But it was almost unbelievable that he couldn't piece any of this together. The court recognized this wasn't your average criminal case. This was something else, something psychological. So neither of them went to prison. The verdict was more of a rehab sentence for both of them. John received a 3-year supervision order, strict adult-monitored internet access, no chat rooms, and most importantly, he was to have no contact with Mark. Mark received a 2-year supervision order, the same digital lockdown and the same ban on communication. But John didn't exactly walk into the sunset of rehabilitation. There was no epiphany, no clean break from the world he had built. The chat rooms were gone, but the storytelling, the compulsive need for him to bend reality stayed. After the trial, he began telling a new version of the goose green stabbing, a different script. This time, he claimed he was attacked for identifying a murderer, that he'd exposed a killer and paid the ultimate price. In John's story, it was more of a vigilante origin story. A lie. To his therapist, he painted himself as a survivor of a conspiracy. To his new girlfriend, yes, girlfriend, that he got with after, he became a tragic hero. They stabbed me because I told the truth, he told her. None of them believed him. Well, not entirely, but he kept telling this story anyway. Years later, during a private session, his therapist wrote, John still misses Mark. He refers to him almost longingly, but he understands now the friendship was never real. Not really. Not in any way that counts. John would admit he felt something else too, contempt. He once told investigators it was like feeding a dog. He loved Mark, sure, but part of him was testing how far Mark would go, like a twisted game. Meanwhile, Mark reemerged different. Not just older, but hardened after the incident. He was withdrawn, rigid. The warmth he once had, the goofy charm, the naivety was gone. He never talked about it. Not a statement, no comment, nothing. Friends said he stopped using chat rooms altogether. How could you not after an incident like this? He instead switched to text with people he knew. He stopped trusting anyone who wasn't physically in front of him. His grades didn't bounce back. He didn't go on any dates. He didn't explain. It's like the moment the knife left his hand, the world broke, and he never fully got to go back inside of it. To me, it's not just deceit, right? This is manipulation. This was like a full blown psychological addiction for both of them. John didn't just catfish Mark, he consumed his entire life. John had created this universe for them, populated it with beautiful girls, cruel villains, high stakes missions, and fantasies of love and power. And then he made Mark feel chosen, special, needed. And then he weaponized that fantasy, turning it back on himself to get what he wanted out of it. Spiral. Or do you think he was really in love and wanted to just get close and it spiraled afterward? Some combination of both? There's a dramatized movie about this. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm curious to see how they portrayed it. I mean, how is this not at least a lifetime script already? We know a lot now, and people, like, with everything we know now, shows like Catfish still exist. And somehow people still fall for it. It doesn't matter how much time's gone by or how many stories we hear about people getting catfish or lied to online. People fall for it every day. So you can imagine that even back then in the early 2000s, you could be whoever you wanted to be online. I mean, truly, I feel like most people from my generation were up in those chat rooms as teenagers, like early teens, middle schoolers, raising absolute hell, telling lie after lie, like yep, I'm actually an astronaut and I live in blah, blah, blah. Or, yeah, I'm the first 14-year-old doctor. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, God, I was lying all the time online, right? It's just what you did. It was like, I don't know, part of my generation at least growing up. So, but you can imagine, like back then, it was so easy to lie. People didn't question it. People didn't question things. You just kind of went with what people said, and you're like, oh my God, that's cool. And it's just wild to think about. And it's pretty insane that somebody can just, it's like insane, but also so creative that somebody can just make up this entire universe to someone and have none of it be real. I mean, John's somebody that should be on a list somewhere. And I'm shocked actually that he wasn't charged harsher. I know his age at the time. He manipulated this person for his own sexual pleasure. And the fact that he coerced someone into committing murder, I mean, even though it was against himself, it's so fucked. But I don't know. I feel like he should have absolutely been given a harsher sentence and sent to some facility where his mental health could be studied, because not only is he a pathological liar, he's a manipulator and a narcissist, and by all accounts seems like a total psychopath. So I don't know where he's at today, but I guarantee he's out there lying, and you don't need to see that to believe that, okay? And that's where we're going to leave it for the week. I will see you on Tuesday with a brand new episode of Cult Leader. And until then, realize, real lies. Goodbye.